Controlling. What is control? Control is the process of assuring the efficient accomplishment of enterprise objectives. In the turbulence environment faced by management, control is necessary to anticipate problems, measure performance against standard, take corrective actions for deviations from plans, and, if necessary, modify plans. The term control may have some negative connotation for some, but in the management process, it is a facilitating function aiding the organization to accomplishment the set objectives. To draw an analogy, it is like a thermostat in an conditioning system. The primary responsibility for exercising control rests with every manager charged with the execution of plans. As Henry Fayol said, in an undertaking, control consists in verifying whether everything occurs in conformity with the plans adopted, the instruction issued, and principles established. Its project is to point out weakness and errors in order to rectify them and prevent recurrence. It operates on everything's people and action. It is wrong to assume that only top management has the responsibility for control and that there is little need of control at lower level of management. While the scope for control may vary to some extent depending upon the position of an employee in the hierarchy, all those who have responsibility for the execution of plans need to exercise control too. The prerequisites and characteristics of effective control system. The major prerequisites of control are two: a plan and a structure. A. Plan. Controls must be based on plan. The more clear and complete the plan are, the more effective controls can be. Plan becomes the standard by which the actions are measured. B. Structure. There is need for a structure to know where the responsibility test rests for deviation and corrective action, if any needed. As in the case of plans, the more clear and complete the organization structure is, the more effective control can be. Controls to be effective should share the following basic characteristics. Appropriate. Control should correspond to an organization's plan. Controls designed for a general manager are inappropriate for a supervisor. Similarly, control system suitable for a line department may be inappropriate for a staff department. Strategic. Control should serve a strategic purpose and provide spotlight on positive and negative expectation. Negative exceptions at critical point. Acceptable. Controls will not work unless people want them to. They should be acceptable to those to whom they apply. Reliable and objective. Controls should accurate and unbiased. If they are unreliable and subjective, people will resent them. Cost effective. The benefits from control should be greater than the cost. Control devices should yield tangible benefits. The control process. The control process involves three steps: establishing standards, measuring performance against this standard, and reinforcing success or corrective deviation. A. Establishing standard. Standards mean criteria of performance. Standard may be of kind of include variable goals set in qualitative and quantitative terms. An organization can establish standards in such areas as profitability, productivity, market share, worker performance, innovation, social responsibility. Standard can be based on past performance, managerial judgment, or scientific analysis. Standards are used to measure performance and judge success or failure. B. Measuring of performance. Essentially, it is a comparison between what is and what should be. The performance ideally ideally measurement should be done on a forward looking bias to basis to predict probably deviation and standard rather than merely to be used as a post mortem exercise. To the extent prediction becomes possible, control becomes effective because appropriate action can be taken well in advance of their actual occurrence. C. Reinforcing success or correctiveness deviation. When plan and organization structures are clear, it is easy to reinforce success and avoid failure. When deviations are noticed or apprehended based on warning sign, the reasons can be analyzed and appropriate corrective action taken promptly. Control as a feedback system. Management control is usually viewed as a feedback system. This is seen more clearly by looking at the process involved in control system. Control is more than a matter of establishing standard, measuring performance and correcting for deviations. To initiate correcting actions, there should be a program or a plan of action which needs to be implemented and monitored as to whether such implementation will give the desired performance. In the simple feedback system, there is a time lag in the control process. The old notion is to look at planning as looking forward and control as looking backward. But good management requires future directed control where it is possible to get feedback somewhat ahead of actual happening than after the event. As Harold Nunge observed, since the past cannot be changed, effective control should be aimed at preventing present and future deviation from plans. Computers make it possible now to get feedback on a real time basis, that is, as of now or on a here and now basis. Where there are time lags in a system, corrective steps should be taken on a proactive basis, predicting or anticipating efforts. As such, effective control system should seek to overcome the efficiency of common or simple feedback system to be modified as feed forward system. Feed forward system monitor inputs into a process to ascertain whether the inputs are as planned. If they are not, the inputs are perhaps the process the changed in the order to ensure the desired action. A feed forward control system is really one of feedback. The only difference is that information feedback is at the input side of the system to so that corrections can be made before the system output is affected. Methods of control. Arthur Bedian discussed 9 methods of control and classifies them into 3 categories based on their frequency of use. Constantly used controls, self control, group control, and policies, procedures, and rules. Next is periodically used controls, management information system, external audits, and budgets. Next is occasionally used control, spatial reports, personal observations, and project controls. The 9 methods of controls mentioned above are briefly discussed in hereunder. Constant control, self control. Manager need to exercise more self-control to minimize the need of other control method and making control in the organization acceptable and effective. Self control means giving a fair day work for a fair day's pay, reporting to work on time, discharging duties and responsibility properly, and respecting the rights of the others in the organization. Self control is more in tune with theory Y discussed later in the unit on leadership styles and influence process in Block 5. Respect for self control in an organization can be motivating factors. A sense of appreciating for self control can be promoted among employees through training in behavior modification. Group control. Work groups are a source of control. Groups define norms exert greater influence in organization than the norms that management may choose to set unilaterally and trust on groups. Group norms and group control can add or hinder formal authority. Organizations would do well to develop and use group control processes to reinforce formal authority, while in some organizations, group control process helped increase output and improve quality. In other, they resulted in restricting output for group norms to contribute in organizational goals. There should be climate of trust and openness, a culture of cooperation than confrontation. Quality cycle of work life programs and work redesign experiments being taken up in some organizations are example that points to organizational trust towards reinforcing group control processes for achieving organizational goals through integration of members interests with those of the organization. Policies, procedures, rules. These are essentially bureaucratic and mechanisms referred to in the discussion on control strategies. They reflect past managerial experience and include a variety of aspects concerning how to make certain decisions, deal with resources, etc. If the policies, procedures, and rules are properly formulated, clearly communicated, and implemented consistently throughout the organization, they can be effective in controlling individual and work group behavior. Periodic controls. Management information system. A management information system is a mechanism designed to collect, combine, compare, analyze, and disseminate data in the form of information. As such, management information system link the various decision making centers within an enterprise and serve a useful function in providing feedback for control process. External audits. The annual financial audit by an outside accounting firm is one form of external audit, mainly of the finances of an organization. In the case of public sector units, such as audit is performed by controller and auditor general. Also, forward looking progressive private companies have in the past sought to have a social audit, not the evaluating financial performance, but to find out whether and how well they have been discharging their social obligations. An example is the case of social audit conducted in Tata Steel in the late 1970s. Budgets. Budgets are plans that deal with the future allocation and utilization of various resources to different enterprise activities over a given period of title. Budget help establish plan and also serve as a basis of measuring or evaluating the standard of performance. Budgetary control is a good example of bureaucratic control strategy. discussed separately in this unit. Occasional control, special reports, these have a special roles. Special reports can be commissioned by an organization when its normal controls system point to the need for detailed investigation or study of a particular operation aspects. When major policy decisions of strategy importance are taken, special reports may be commissioned. This includes situations where the organizations find the need for overcoming the existing difficulties, modernization, expansion, diversification, merger, acquisition, etc. Special reports vary in content and style depending upon the purpose. They could be prepared internally by managers in the organization or by consultants or outside institutions. Special reports are a valuable method for controlling in turbulent environment, warranting changes in products and markets, technology and production processes, organizational structure, etc. Personal observations. Managers can know what is happening in an organization by relying on information provided by others as also by finding out for them. First hand knowledge has to be critical to be effective. The importance of personal observation is best illustrated by Arthur Bedion through his reference to the ill fated ITT effort to build a giant wood cellulose plant in Canada. The resulting 320 billions millions $320 million loss could probably have been averted if someone had just gone to Canada and looked at the trees, which grew to no more than an uneconomical 3 inches in diameter. Project control. Various methods have been developed for controlling specific enterprise projects. The best example is the network analysis using the tool. PERT is an acronym of Program Evaluation and Review Technique. It is a diagram showing the interrelationship between the events and activities that comprise a project. It is detailed, easy to communicate means for determining current status of project, stimulate alternatives, plans and schedules and controlling activities. Policies and design choices in control. Organizations have three options in exercising control. First, centralization or delegation. Next, formal and informal. Next, direct or indirect. Preferences for one or a mix of all options are matter of judgment. Judgment in turn could be based on theory, practice, or premonition. Each option has relevance in a particular situation. Here we shall briefly consider the three options mentioned above. Centralization or delegation. The concept of centralization, decentralization, and delegation were discussed in the previous unit. Delegations and interdepartmental coordination. Centralization is an approach where control is exercised by the chief executive or the top management group, comparing a few individual others in the lower rungs of hierarchy cannot act on their own or use their discretion. Thus, functional autonomy will be lacking at operating levels. Delegation, on the contrary, manifests transfer of decision making authority downwards and outwards within the formal structure. For example, in a multi plant situation, Managers may take decisions without having to seek prior consent of head office on financial matters involving a sum of not more than 2 lakhs in each transaction. This is an instead of delegation of financial powers. If a transaction involves a expenditure of 2.5 lakhs, the plant manager will have to refer to the head office which exercises control over the decision. Sometimes decision making power is transferred downwards in a hierarchy prescribing limits on the scope and type of decisions. For example, a branch manager is allowed to spend up to Rs 5,000 per month on consumables without referring upwards for approval, so long as it falls within the monthly budget. Here, although the decision making power is transferred, overall control is incorporated into an arrangement where delegation occurs in an organization wide constant. It becomes decentralization. Centralized control. First point is make it easier to coordinate the activities of various subunits, departments in an organization. Next point is seeks to achieve balance among various functions because the top management can be expected to have a broad organization wide perspective. Next point is prove more useful because control will be in the hand of senior experienced top executive. Next point is necessary to meet extraordinary situations, and the next point is economical since duplication in activities and resources use can be avoided. Delegation and decentralization too have positive features. First point is they relieve the top management from overload. Second is motivate individuals to give better performance due to opportunities for individual freedom, discretion, and control. Next point is contribute to the personal and professional development of manager. And the next point is people at operating levels are more knowledgeable about the dynamics in decision making situations and can be expected to take appropriate actions to suit local conditions. This is particularly true in the case of large and widely dispersed units. And the next point is afford prompt actions and provides flexibility. As seen above, both the beneficial but each one is appropriate for specific conditions and situations. The option is to be exercised at two levels. First, in respect of different types of decisions which vary in importance. Next is the contingencies and capabilities of manager in the total context of the organization. Strategic decision making and control can be centralized, routine operational matters can be delegated and decentralized. Large organizations with widely dispersed units find a greater need for delegation. Formal or informal. Formalization refers to establishing writing policies, procedures, rule, etc., which prescribe the do's or don'ts. As organizations grow, formalization grows. Formalization renders activities more predictable in a desired direction and facilitates coordination and control. In large organizations where it is no longer possible to retain high degree of centralized controls, formalizations helps to retain consistency and continuity by restraining the negative effects of delegation and decentralization. Formalization is appropriate for large organizations operating in conditions of stability, but in today's fast changing environment, complete formalizations may not be desirable and predictable. Excessive formalization vitiates the complete climate for initiative and employees' freedom in performance, result in employees' resistance, and may even become counterproductive. Formalization can be effective in so far as policies, procedures, and rules are flexible enough and reviewed periodically to make them appropriate to current changing situation. Direct or indirect. There are two ways of controlling. One way is to survive subordinates' activities closely, trace deviations to the persons reliable, responsible, and get them to correct their practices. This is called indirect control. The other way is to develop high quality managers who will probably understand the and apply managerial principles, functions, techniques, and philosophy, make few mistakes and initiate corrective actions wherever necessary themselves. This is called direct control. The higher the quality of manager and their subordinates, the less will be the need of indirect controls. Exercising close supervisions through indirect controls adds to overhead costs and reduces employee motivations. Modern management practices all call for a greater degree of self control, which in effect means direct control by those who perform work. With the revolution in the information technology using computers, control can be exercised through real time information, that is, gathering information on what is happening as events are occurring. This made it easy for organizations to combine direct controls and indirect controls. But here, indirect control is exercised not through close personal supervision but through modern technology, and hence, several of the negative features of close personal supervisions of superiors, such as infringement on freedom of operations and subjectivity in evaluation, are avoided. Direct control hastens corrective actions lighten and burden caused by indirect control, and subordinates feel less concerned about superiors' subjectivity in rating their performance, because in indirect control one would feel a close relationship between performance and measurement. Strategies of control. John Child John Child discusses for control strategies as listed in figure 4. Figure 4, four strategies of control in organization. Each strategy will utilize one or more of the features listed. First, personal centralized control. First point, centralized decision making. Next, this is direct supervision, and next is personal leadership founded upon ownership of or charisma or technical expertise. Next is reward and punishment reinforce conformity to personal authority. Second is bureaucratic control. And first point is breaking down of task into easily definable elements. Next is formally specified methods, procedures, and rules applied for the conduct of task. And third is budgetary and standard cost variance according to control. Technology designed to limit variation in conduct of tasks with respect to piece, sequence, and possibly physical method. Next point is routine decision taking delegated within prescribed limits. And next point is reward and punishment system reinforce conformity to procedures and rules. Third, output control. And first of its points is job and units designed to be responsible for complete outputs. Next point is specification of outputs, standard and targets. Next point is use of responsibility accounting system. Next point is delegation of decisions and on operational matters, semi autonomy. And the next point is reward and punishment linked to attainment of output targets. And the fourth is cultural control. And first point of it is development of strong identification with management goals. Next point, several semi-autonomous working, few formal controls. Next point is strong emphasis on this selection, training and development of personnel. Next point is rewards oriented towards security of tenure and career progression. A. Personal centralized control. Strategy is usually found in small owner managed enterprise. Control is centralized in a proprietor or chief executive who combines his rights of ownership with his unique personal qualities and expertise. Such a system rewards and punishment are based on more on loyalty to leader than competence. The system makes it easy to breed favoritism, and distorts feedback to so vital for control. B. Bureaucratic control. Strategy is the most common features in large organizations in both private and public sectors beside government. The main thrust of bureaucratic control strategy is to ensure predictability through the specific of how people in the organization shall behave the carry out their work. Formalization in the sense of written definition of jobs and procedures is the most characteristic features of the bureaucratic control strategy. Division of work in modern industrial organizations lends to itself to simplification and standardization. The focus in highly bureaucratic organizations is to seek compliance and keeping your nose clean. Rules then becomes more important than goals. Compliance result in job security and other benefits, and non-compliance leads to sanctions and punishments. The accounting control system are perhaps the best example of bureaucratic control strategy. One advantage of bureaucratic control strategy is that the delegation becomes easy in such system. Manager can be easily delegate without losing control over what is going on so long as such delegation occurs within formalized limits to discretion. C. Output control. Strategy is appropriate in case of activities where it is easy to identify tasks which are complete in themselves and their outcomes measurable in definite terms. Common criteria of achievement applied to individual or groups, product lines, and whole units respectively are quantity of item processed, value added, profitability, etc. Once output or criteria for overall achievement have been identified, it is possible for management to specify output standards and targets. Rewards and punishment system can be linked with the actual performance with a vis standard and targets. Measurement is the most important activity in the job of a manager. It is also one of the weakest areas. Output control strategy becomes relatively difficult to apply in office jobs and where the relationship between effort and outcome is not easy to establish. In production jobs, on the other hand, output control is easy and effective. Once output standards are agreed upon mutually by the management and work group or individual work, it is easy to grant semi autonomy to the worker or work group and hold the worker or work group responsible for the output. Thus, output control strategy too, like bureaucratic control strategy, facilitates delegation and at the same time is free of the negation features of bureaucratic control. One major problem with output control strategy, however, is the possible resistance from work group for improving the methods of working norms of output, etc. Thus, it can even stand in the way of introducing technological changes and introduction of improvements based on work study and work simplification. The other major and practical problem is related to establishing suitable and agreeable measures of output. D. Cultural control. Strategy refers to an approach of maintaining control by ensuring that members of an organization accept as legitimate and willingly comply with the managerial requirements. This requires strong professional identification and high degree of loyalty to the organization. To the extent that employees and subordinates in any organization accept management rights to give executive instructions, one may say that a degree of cultural control already exists. This is reinforced further through conscious effort to develop this pragmatic effort into a more enthusiastic support for management's purposes and organizational goals. As John Child says, cultural control combined with personal autonomy to follow strongly internalized norms of competence and conduct has long been the mark of the professionals. Recent administrative controls, they accept controls comparable with the mode of self control within agreed cultural parameters worked out through discussion and negotiations. Experiments in autonomous work groups, quality circles, and quality of work life programs are examples in this direction. Cultural control fosters closer identification with organization and induces a high degree of motivations towards result oriented behavior. Summary of controlling in management. We have observed that control is the process of assuring the efficient accomplishment of enterprise objectives. It is primarily responsibility of everyone who has responsibility of execution of plans. Controls should be based on the plans and there is need for a structure to know where the responsibility lies. Control should be appropriate, strategic, acceptable, or objectives and cost effective. The control process involves three steps: establishing standards, measuring performance, and reinforcing success or correct deviations. Controls can be constant, periodic, or occasional. As a matter of policy, organizations may prefer control to be centralized or dispersed and delegated, formal and informal, and direct or indirect. Large organization needs delegation, certain amount of formalization, and direct control system. The control strategies can be classified as personal and centralized, bureaucratic, output oriented, or cultural. The appropriateness of strategies varies from organizations to organization.